I'm Bob Short, and this is Reflections on Georgia Politics, sponsored by the Richard Russell Library at the University of Georgia and Young Harris College. Our guest is Doug Teper, 8-term member of the Georgia House of Representatives, that's 16 years, who recently returned from Iraq, or is it Iraq?
Depends where you're from.
Where he served as a governance specialist for the U.S. Department of State. Doug, we're delighted to have you.
Well, thank you, Bob. I'm honored to be asked to be here.
Let's get started by talking about your early life growing up in Atlanta.
Okay. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia Baptist Hospital, but I was reared in DeKalb County. And right on the county line, right between Atlanta and DeKalb County, a lot of friends I grew up with went to Atlanta City schools, and I ended up going to the county schools out near Emory University. I went to public school out there, Briarcliff High School, Briar Vista Elementary, and I'm the youngest of 4. And my parents, my father was a small business owner. He was a home addition contractor. Never really formally educated, never graduated officially from high school. He got his GED, I think, in Chicago. And he was in World War II. But being the youngest of a family and growing up in what was then suburban DeKalb County, had a great life out there. And a lot of what I am today is definitely, I'm a product of my parents and my family.
You attended the University of Georgia.
Yes, I did.
Is it true that your first political race was right here on the campus at the University of Georgia?
Well, there's actually a little footnote that goes with that. When I was in the 8th grade at Briarcliff High School, I attempted to run for 8th grade class president, and I was disqualified because of my conduct grades at Briar Vista Elementary, and I was not allowed to run for office. So technically, my first race was here at the University of Georgia, where I ran for Student Government Association president.
Well, tell us about that.
I had the good fortune, I had a brother who went to school here before me, and I had a sister who was in school when I was here. And I had learned a little bit about the history of student government. And from my understanding of it, at one point, student government had some powers. They got to allocate some funds, student activities funds for different activities. But as the years had gone through in the late 60s and early 70s, when the students would try to do controversial things, the administration didn't take kindly to that, and they took some of the powers away. By the time I was in college in the mid-70s, student government didn't have much power at all. A big controversy that came up was what kind of core curriculum, what kind of classes would all the students have to take. The Student Senate put together a study committee. They called universities around the Southeast United States to see what kind of classes students took. Make a really long story short, the administration was not interested in what the students had to say. And a lot of folks got upset. And one of the people who got upset was a student senator by the name of Harold Mulheron from Savannah, Georgia. And he was a great guy. He was, I think, a 4.0 honor student in economics. And he had been a student senator, and he decided to run for student government as an abolitionist candidate. He was going to abolish student government if he was elected. Well, I was originally not for that. My background, I had grown up going camping up in North Georgia, and my brothers and I had gone all throughout the mountains in the north, and we had gone out on trails, hiking, and overnight camping, and I had learned to appreciate the beautiful environment of Georgia, and I was a bit of an early environmental activist. And I didn't think we should abolish student government. I thought we should push and do more with it. Well, there were about 9 candidates running for Student Government Association president. The year before us, a guy had run with a bag over his head as a joke candidate. His name was the Unknown Candidate. It was a spoof on the Gong Show. There was a comedian called the Unknown Comic who used to tell jokes with a bag over his head. And this guy had run with a bag over his head and gotten elected. And he later became a good acquaintance of mine. But Harold Mulheron wanted to move from making student government a joke to just abolishing it. I wanted to do something with it. The election was held. I came in third out of 9 candidates, and there was a runoff. And a lot of people seem to think that the third place candidate had some kind of influence as far as an endorsement. Well, I took it very seriously, and I went and talked to a lot of folks who had been involved in student government. I went to Atlanta and talked to some folks older than me who had been active. And I decided to back the abolitionist candidate. And I got on his team. I might want to mention he was also the president of a club on campus called the Brewmasters, who lobbied for beer on campus. And so we had a lot of fun with that. But Harold Mulheron ended up winning student government. He had me go lobby the newly elected student senate to have a referendum on campus. And we had a referendum, and the students voted to abolish their own constitution. And we abolished student government. And what I knew then and what I knew later was student government had been a practicing ground for a lot of famous politicians in Georgia history. I don't have the list, but everybody from, I think, Herman Talmadge on up, we had a number of people who had gone on to do great things who had started in student politics at University of Georgia. So when we abolished it, it made a little news around the country.
I believe you ran for Congress as a young man also.
Yeah, I did. I left University of Georgia a little bit early. I had gotten a little anxious, and I left school my senior year, and I had gone up to Washington to work on a big week of rallies and lobbying on energy and environmental issues. That was in 1980. And one other thing that had happened was there was a bill that was pending before the Georgia legislature in 1980. And I went to a meeting at Manuel's Tavern, and I met a bunch of folks that I had never met before. I was still basically a student. And one of the people I met worked over at the Georgia Public Service Commission. And I stood up at this meeting and I said, I just left school and I'm willing to I got time and energy. And they took me down there and introduced me to a public service commissioner by the name of Billy Lovett, who I think at that time had been one of the youngest statewide elected officials in the history of Georgia. I think Richard Russell and Billy Lovett were somewhere around 30 years old when they got elected statewide. And anyway, I got to know Billy, and I lobbied down at the legislature on a bill that had to do with paying for power plants. Georgia Power and Southern Company spend a lot of money when they build a power plant, and there's 2 ways you can do it. You can put your own money up and wait till you finish and then start charging your customers, and that way you have to borrow money if you do it the first way. And the other way is to try to get the customers to pay up front. And their argument, which has some rational basis to it, was it's cheaper to get the money from the customers ahead of time than to borrow it. And anyway, we were against paying for it up front. We thought it was a private company and they should put their own money up. And so I lobbied in 1980, and we beat that bill. I learned a lot about the Georgia legislature that year. I also met Billy Lovett's administrative assistant, a woman named Judy Barrow. And Judy Barrow was a coal miner's daughter from West Virginia. and she was feisty, and she decided that she had had enough with Georgia Power, and she decided to run for Public Service Commission herself. And I ended up working on her campaign, and we had no money to speak of, and I drove her well over 40,000 miles that summer of 1980. It was one of the hottest summers in memory. I think I had a three-piece suit on and went to just about every county in the state, and it was a great education for a young kid like me to drive someone around, and we were running against Jim Hammock, who was a great guy and had helped Sam Nunn get elected, if I remember correctly, and Jim had gotten, I think, appointed to the Public Service Commission, and he beat Judy pretty good. But I had a great time, and I got to meet a lot of politicians and power brokers all over the state, and that really lit the fire under me. Soon after that, I finished school at DeKalb College and then Georgia State University. Had a lot of influences in academic life. I had Dr. Bill Thomas was a political science professor at Georgia State, a great mentor, and influenced a lot of kids, helped a lot of kids get into law school. And he headed up the intern program at the legislature for many years. I had another professor, Colonel Jim McBriar, who taught international politics. Little did I know later in my life he would be an influence as well. But I graduated in '82 and immediately went to work on Billy Lovett's governor's race in '82. And that was a big race. There were half a dozen candidates in that race, and once again went all over the state, and had a lot of friends working on Bo Ginn's campaign and Joe Frank Harris's campaign, and Billy got whooped pretty good in that one too. But that gears us up. You asked me about me running for office. Having worked on several campaigns, I ended up working on a presidential race in '84. I met U.S. Senator Gary Hart from Colorado, and had a meeting at a big law firm downtown Atlanta. One of the big ones. Hart had gone to law school with one of the partners. They had a meeting down there, and I signed on, and I actually got to meet, I think at the time I met a young guy named James Carville and Paul Bugella, who were early in their consulting careers. And I ended up doing a lot. I went to New Hampshire for several weeks and knocked on doors for Gary Hart, and Hart actually ended up beating Mondale in New Hampshire that year. I became the Georgia press secretary for Hart, and of course CNN was based out of Atlanta and was relatively new with 24-hour cable, so I became a bit of a fixture on TV for the first Super Tuesday. And I really got excited about politics. Ultimately, Mondale won the nomination, but I ended up going down in April and putting my name down to run for U.S. Congress in the 10th Congressional District, which was, the incumbent was Doug Bernard from Augusta, Georgia, who was a chairman of a subcommittee in banking. He was a pretty permanent fixture up there, and I knew at the time that it was a long shot to run against him. The district ran all the way to Athens, and I had an apartment here in Athens, and I went out in the state, and my big issue that year was, I think the Congress was debating the Alaska National Wilderness Preserve, which seems to come up every 10 years or so. And Doug did not have the best environmental record. I think the League of Conservation Voters on a scale of 0 to 100 had given him a 6. So I went around the district and I talked about how Doug needed to do more for the environment. And I think he ended up actually casting a vote in our favor somewhere along the way. So he beat me pretty good. I had somebody at the Washington National Airport come up to me And you know people study this stuff. He came up to me and said, you know, you had the best vote per dollar in the country last year. But I still got beat pretty good. But that was 1984, and I did run for Congress that year.
Let's move up to 1988. That's the year you ran for the General Assembly.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You beat you won the Democratic primary and defeated a Republican opponent. Yeah. Tell us about that race.
I'm going to jump over a little bit of my history where I had gone up to Washington to work. I had worked on some campaigns in Georgia. I had helped John Lewis, who was on the Atlanta City Council, run for Congress. I worked in the runoff for him against Julian Bond, who was also a very good acquaintance of mine. Wyche Fowler had run for U.S. Senate and gotten elected. So I knew both those gentlemen. And I moved to Washington and thought I was going to be working on Capitol Hill. Well, I ended up not getting hired by either of those guys. But I did get a couple jobs in Washington. I worked for the Union of Concerned Scientists. I worked for something called U.S. Public Interest Research Group on environment and energy issues. I worked for a group called Environmental Policy Institute. So I got some good background up there, but my heart was always back in Georgia. And I was keeping my ear to the ground, and I heard a rumor that my state representative back home from my neighborhood I grew up in DeKalb County, Kathy Steinberg, that she, after 14 years, was going to give up her seat to run for Public Service Commission. And I had learned enough about politics to know that an open seat does not come open that often. So I was in D.C., I had an apartment. I had kept my home in Atlanta at my parents' house. And I came home and I went to all the local power brokers and I asked them if I should run. I was 29 years old. I had a reputation as a bit of a goofball, an environmental activist, not something you traditionally see at the Georgia legislature. I went to Manuel Maloof, who was chairman of the county commission and a very large power broker. Went to see Liana Levitan, who was a county commissioner out there, who my family had supported. Robin Harris, who was head of Decatur Federal Savings Bank and a member of the legislature, a very valuable member of the legislature. I knew who the folks were I was supposed to go see, and I talked to them all, and pretty much every one of them told me not to run. And being who I am, I ignored them. And I went ahead and threw my hat in the ring. Turned out there were about half a dozen of us who got in the Democratic primary. My first task was to try to put together a campaign committee. And I had worked on a lot of campaigns, a lot of losing campaigns. And I like to joke that I knew what not to do. I wasn't sure I knew what to do. I had to find a campaign manager, and there were two gentlemen who had just helped, I believe it was Mary Margaret Oliver, get elected in a special election out there. I didn't know these gentlemen. I had a lot of friends who were political operatives, and I wanted to hire a friend, but I really wanted to win. And so these guys had just won a couple of races, and I went to them, two guys named Jim Coonan and Bernard Cox. And I think they appreciated my enthusiasm, and I let them run my campaign. And the campaign was very simple. I knocked on doors of voters. You could get the voting information of people who had voted in elections, and we targeted people. I call them blue-haired hurricane ladies. Those are older ladies who will vote even if there's a hurricane outside. And you know they're going to vote in a Democratic primary in the middle of the summer when it's hot. They're going to go. And so we targeted all the people we were pretty sure were going to vote. And I knocked on about 6,000 doors from April through August and got into the runoff against my neighbor across the street, Holly Bates. And Holly is a great person. Her daddy, Bill Bates, had worked as press secretary for Herman Talmadge, I believe.
Senator Russell.
Senator Russell.
Yeah.
That's right. He was with Senator Russell. Mm-hmm. And And Holly, being real proud of her daddy, and had worked with him doing some lobbying, she was promoting herself as having inside information, as far as knowing her way around the legislature, because she had been a lobbyist and her family had been involved in old Georgia politics. Well, in my mind, that was pretty good, but for a lot of people in my district, that actually kind of counted against her. And it was interesting. The more she pushed the fact that she'd been experienced at the Capitol, I think they were looking for some new blood. And what ended up happening is I edged Holly out in the runoff, and which was tantamount to winning the election because it was a very Democratic district. Mm-hmm. So I ended up beating the Republican in November, and I was in.
Describe your constituency for us.
Okay.
Your district.
Yeah. I would argue at that time it was the most ethnically diverse district possibly in the Southeast United States. I mean, you have communities in Florida that might be Hispanic or Cuban. You might have different neighborhoods that have different ethnicities. I had Buford Highway, which after Andy Young served as ambassador to the United Nations under President Carter, every refugee who seemed to come to the East Coast of the United States, a lot of them came to Atlanta, and they would get in an apartment on Buford Highway. My family managed an apartment complex on Buford Highway. Out of 135 units, we had 100 different nationalities. So I had everybody from Asia to South America living along there. Now, these weren't necessarily voters, but they lived in my district. And they had needs, a lot of needs. Refugees have everything from healthcare needs, schooling needs, and it was interesting. Now, closer to home in my neighborhood that I grew up in, we had one of the largest Orthodox Jewish communities south of Baltimore, Maryland. There's a synagogue there where people walk on the Sabbath. From Friday night through Saturday, you would see them dressed in traditional Hasidim clothes walking to the synagogue. We also had a Cuban community and a big Greek community. To this day, the western headquarters of the Eastern Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox Church is in that area. So for Georgia, which is traditionally not necessarily a real multi-ethnic area, I had a wonderful mix of people from all over the world, and it was a very interesting place to try to represent.
Well, constituencies are important because they usually dictate a politician's political philosophy.
That's true.
How would you define yours?
I was a mix. I'm a Georgia boy, and I had gone to the University of Georgia, and I was aware of the legislature, and my father was a small businessman, and I always joke that I remember seeing him when I was a kid. 1968, my mama had some family in Miami, and the Republican convention was going on, and I seem to remember my father and a cousin of mine having a Archie Bunker meathead discussion where my father was playing Archie Bunker and my cousin was the meathead, the liberal. And so I had some traditional, what I would call conservative influences, but I also had this multi-ethnic community. I had a lot of families whose the parents worked at Emory University or at Georgia Tech, and a lot of small business owners and professionals lived in our neighborhood. So it tended to be liberal with a little Georgia streak in there as well, and I think that's kind of what my politics were.
So in January of 1989, you were sworn in as a member of a very conservative, one-party dominated legislature with a reputation as a defender of the status quo. You and a few of your colleagues quickly set out to change that. Tell us about the Four Horsemen.
Well, I think arguably I had the reputation as being probably the most radical coming in because I had attended a number of demonstrations in Washington, D.C., and I'd worked for environmental organizations. And I had been active in the Young Democrats, and I had a label. And I also, I'll be honest, part of my reputation came from my predecessor, Kathy Steinberg, who had pushed for the Equal Rights Amendment, which was, believe it or not, considered controversial back then. I was taking her seat. The one other interesting thing, of course, was my background as being Jewish. When I got elected, I turned out to be the only Jewish member in the whole Georgia legislature. Out of 180 House members and 56 senators, I was the only Jewish member. So that made me a little different than a lot of my colleagues. I also remember very clearly, when you get elected, the speaker has a reception, and all the new members go down there, and a lot of the old members go down there. And I had a couple of guys who had been down there 14 years, and they put their arms around my shoulder and they said, "Son, now you take your seat and keep your mouth shut, and after about 14 years, you might be able to do something." And I remember thinking at the time, my district is not going to let me sit quietly for much less 14 years, a few years. They're not going to put up with it. That's not what they elected me to do. So I knew from the get-go that there was going to be a battle, and there was going to be some changes that were going to be requested. And so I immediately found some partners in this conspiracy. I had met some of them through the years. McCracken Poston from Ringgold, Georgia, a year younger than me, had worked on a number of campaigns in the state. He and I had bumped into each other over the years. He was ambitious, and he's very eloquent and a smart kid. Ron Fennell from Brunswick, Georgia, who had worked for Zell Miller as a staffer. Ron had, I had met him in Young Democrats. A story I don't tell too often, but Steve Henson, who is currently the minority leader in the Senate, recruited me at Manual's. I didn't know Steve that well some years earlier, to go to a Young Democrats convention. He was running for president of Young Democrats, and Steve said that he'd give me a ride up to North Georgia where the convention was. They'd buy me some drinks and introduce me to some young ladies. I said, that sounded good to me. And we went up there, and Steve was running against a young Ron Fennell. And Steve beat Ron Fennell for president of Young Democrats. Just a few years later, I become best friends with Ron Fennell and from Brunswick, Georgia. So he was the next one. And then, of course, Ray Holland from Ashburn, Georgia, Turner County. He came on, and he was a couple years older, and he had been around Southwest Georgia politics for a long time, had been friends with Governor Busby. He knew a lot about politics in Southwest Georgia. He was a smart kid, had gone to the University of Georgia and law school, and he was what's called the Fourth Horseman. I do want to mention that there is what I sometimes call the Fifth Horseman, or the Fifth Beatle. Curtis Jenkins from just above Macon is a lawyer and a smart guy, and he was a very close friend of ours, and would provide support from time to time.
Was that the same as the Democratic Reform Caucus?
A couple years later, it was. We, my first 2 years, we kind of towed the line. We learned our way around. The speaker doted on the four of us. He took us to lunch, and he would invite us to get-togethers, and I even think some of the older members kind of, there was a little bit of jealousy going on, but the speaker was a smart man, and he knew how to count. And the speaker wasn't doing this because he loved us. He was doing it because when it came time for battles in the legislature, he needed folks on his side. And he also, the Republicans were starting to gather steam. There weren't a lot there. It was only, I think, in the 60s, the number of votes in the House. But the speaker was smart about that, and he knew that he was going to need help. So he was currying favor with us.
Mm-hmm. That didn't seem to stop you from your reform program.
Well, there were some things that happened. Number one, we observed what was going on with the leadership got to make most of the major decisions, and we understand that's almost in any legislative body on earth. But at the point at which you're ignored or you're taken for granted, I think some of us young, ambitious members wanted to change things, and we were going to push a little bit. And there were some early battles that kind of told us how things were going. I think one of the most famous ones is what's called retail divorcement. I was very lucky. My freshman year, Speaker Murphy put me on 2 committees that I really wanted. The first was Natural Resource and Environment. Being a big environmentalist, it was the biggest favor he'd ever done me. The second one, which I didn't understand at the time, he put me on an Industry Committee, which was a fairly powerful committee. As a freshman, not a lot of freshmen got on that committee. Well, as it turned out, there was a subcommittee called Small Business, and that's where a little bill called retail divorcement was holed up. Retail divorcement has nothing to do with divorce. It has to do with the petroleum industry, the gasoline industry. The major oil companies love having retail gas stations all over the state. Well, your mom and pop stores were starting to complain that the big oil companies were undercutting them in price. And even before I had gotten to the legislature under Governor Harris, there had been a push to say that the big oil companies could not sell directly through their gas stations. They were going to divorce the big oil companies from the retail business. And of course, the mom and pop stores, which included a lot of corner gas stations all throughout rural Georgia, where a lot of politicians did their business. So they had a lot of support, the mom and pops did. But this is where the story gets interesting. Even before I was elected, the Georgia Petroleum Association, where I had some very good friends there, started to invite me to get-togethers. There's a famous one at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Atlanta. I got to go on a hot air balloon ride. Went to Talladega for a NASCAR race. And of course, I thought they were doing it because of my friendly nature. What I did not realize at the time was there was this bill that was going to be coming down the road, and it affected the big oil company. And they wanted to make sure that they had built a relationship with the new members. And lo and behold, that bill pops up, and the way it pops up is my buddy, McCracken Poston, introduces it. And it gets assigned to the Industry Committee, and it goes to the subcommittee on small business. Well, we joked about the bill. It became known as the Full Employment Act. Every independent lobbyist in the legislature got hired by one side or the other to lobby on that. I had a full-time babysitter. I had people who were taking me to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They wanted to make sure I wasn't at an eye shot because they were concerned what would happen when this bill came up for a vote. And I got to tell you, it got aggravating. My constituents were actually, they were against the bill. The big oil, Exxon or whoever, had big gas stations in Atlanta. We didn't have a lot of the old mom and pops left. For my constituents, it meant cheaper gasoline. So for my constituents, I didn't have a problem. What I had a problem with was I felt like I was an errand boy for big petroleum companies. And I told them that I had committed to voting, when the vote came up, to voting against retail divorcement, but I didn't want them babysitting me all the time. And a very famous story happened. The bill got from the subcommittee to the full committee, and it was, I think it was 12-12, and it was stuck in committee. You needed, or it was 12-11. The chairman, Sonny Watson from Warner Robins, he wanted the bill out, but he couldn't vote unless it was a tie. And I got so tired of the big oil lobbyists babysitting me that one day there was an industry committee meeting, and a couple of my colleagues in the legislature told me that we needed to go to lunch. Well, I went to lunch, and somehow or other, I didn't get back to the Capitol in time for the industry committee, and the vote was 11-11, and Chairman Watson cast the vote, and the bill came out of committee. And I became very famous for, the quote was, being out to lunch, which allowed the bill to come to the floor. But as many people will tell you, the bill ultimately died, but the lobbyists in the hallway spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was, I think the newspapers reported, and a lot of my colleagues would say, it was almost obscene the way that everybody was spending money and for this one bill. And I think it had an effect on the Four Horsemen and on the folks who were concerned about appearances of how our elected officials were being lobbied.
On one occasion, the Four Horsemen filed an ethics complaint against the Speaker. Why? Well,
we need to back up a little bit. After the retail divorcement bill, you had McCracken Poston and others push for lobbying disclosure. The net effect of that retail divorcement bill was people want to know who was lobbying and how much money they were spending. And it seemed, that did not seem obscene to some of us new members. We seemed like it was, what our constituents wanted to know. So we had a big fight over that, and it got ugly at times, but ultimately we succeeded in passing that bill. One of the other things that came out of that was what's called the Holland Manifesto. And part of the stories that's not been told about that, Ray Holland had drafted in very lawyer-like manner a couple of dozen recommendations to the House leadership about things that might help for the future of the legislature. And things like just having bills introduced early so that we might take a look at it so that we don't have to vote on a bill we've never read or looked at. We trust our colleagues, but to have a colleague get up in the podium of the House and describe a 100-page bill in about 45 seconds by saying, this bill don't hardly do nothing, and then 150 of us would vote for the bill, we thought it was reasonable to have a bill come out early to give us some time to at least get some opinion from back home, how folks felt about it. So we had a big list of demands. And one of the Holland Manifesto points was to create an ethics committee, which we had not had. And Speaker Murphy, well, first of all, I need to tell that Ray Holland had drafted this thing up, and it was a private document. And on the last day of, I can't remember, it was early in our careers, I think it was the third session, I made 180 copies and had them passed out on the floor. Ray was furious at me. I believe I took his name off of it, but it was known as the Holland Manifesto. So everybody in the legislature saw what the Democratic Reform Caucuses, what their demands were. And Speaker Murphy, being the brilliant politician he was, he adopted quite a few of those recommendations. He knew that the future was coming and that some changes had to be made. And he saw what he thought was reasonable, and he adopted those recommendations, which gets us to the fights with Speaker Murphy. The one that I got a little bit involved in was something that was, well, let me back up one second, because Speaker Murphy, after the ethics reform legislation was passed, and after an election, we decided to run somebody against Speaker Murphy. And we picked Dubose Porter from Dublin, Georgia, and Ken Poston and a small group of people backed Dubose. And Speaker Murphy is a great vote counter, and he basically crushed us. And those who were involved in backing backing Dubose, Speaker Murphy had to, I don't want to use the word punish, but he had to make it known that there were repercussions of your actions. And one of the things that happened to me was I came in that session to industry committee, and what normally happens with industry committee, the first day at the organizing committee, the room is packed. It was a pretty powerful committee, and Chairman Watson would pass out a piece of paper to all the members with your subcommittee assignments. And I was sitting right next to Chairman Watson, and he passed out a piece of paper, and we're all sitting at this big table, and the room is packed, and we're all looking to see what subcommittees we got. And I opened mine up, and not much business is done that first day. And he said, "Is there any questions?" And I raised my hand. I'm sitting right next to him, and he said, "Representative Teper?" And I said, "Mr. Chairman, I don't have any subcommittees." And he said, "That's right." So I got sent a message. They didn't take me off of industry committee. They just took away my subcommittees that year. Well, I was a little sore about that because that's where business gets done. About that time, of course, McCracken Poston from Ringgold was in full-blown war with the Speaker, and someone had contacted him about Speaker Murphy practicing law out in West Georgia, and there was a special attorney general that was working on a case where if you had been accused of any kind of, I think, child molestation or sex crimes, you went on a registry. And Speaker Murphy had been representing somebody and had a petition to take the name off. And the special attorney general had opposed Speaker Murphy. And Speaker Murphy made some, in the courthouse, he made some comments that the department was going to lose some funding. And she thought that was outrageous, and she called McCracken Poston, who had been in the newspapers about all his ethics reform, but she also called me because, as it turned out, I had gone to law school with her. I had gone to law school for a year back in 1985-86, and she was a classmate of mine. So she called me and she said it was outrageous that in a legal matter that the Speaker had used, in her perception, had used his position to kind of bully her. Well, in the midst of all this ethics reform and this controversy, I ended up signing on with McCracken Poston on the ethics complaint against the Speaker. And it was also a test of the new ethics committee. And it was not a pleasant thing to do because I was not there. I don't know exactly what happened. It did point up a problem with the citizen legislature. We had a bunch of lawyers who constantly were forced into the position of arguing cases for private clients on laws that they had either drafted or had been involved in. And it's not their fault, it's our citizen legislature, but it did put people into precarious situations at times. So that was one of the big confrontations that happened on ethics complaints.
Let's talk about your legislation.
Okay.
I fondly recall your attempt to have Georgia's electric chair replaced by a guillotine. Did you actually believe that bill would pass?
No, I did not. I had, with the help of some friends in the hallway, had come up with a strategy which I have lived to regret. There were bills that one would introduce over the years that quite often would never get a hearing in committee. And sometimes you knew that what might be good for your district may not be good for the whole state of Georgia. Or you might have a constituent that had a situation at home or with the courts, and you were trying to help them, but you also knew that you shouldn't change all the state law just for one person back home. 2 or 3 things that happened. The more famous than the guillotine even was, and this is a little This should be rated for adult content. But one of the controversial issues that had come up in the legislature was the state sodomy law. And there were people of the libertarian nature who believed that what people did, what consenting adults did in the privacy of their own bedroom, should be none of the legislature's business. Well, there had been laws on the books in Georgia on things, some of which come from the Bible, having to do with adultery and fornication and sodomy, and they were in the books, and people had been introducing bills in the legislature to decriminalize them, not legalize them, but just take away the penalties. Some of them, they were a misdemeanor, subject to fine and some imprisonment. For sodomy, consensual sodomy, which had a definition in Georgia which was different than other states, it actually applied to married heterosexuals. If they did certain things, that they were guilty of a felony, which was subject to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. People who were trying to decriminalize that would drop that bill in every year and never get a hearing. Well, it was obvious to some of us that Georgia, being a Bible Belt state, that this was uncomfortable debating such issues in the legislature. It never came to a vote. I had some friends in the hallway who said, well, if it's going to be on the books, let's talk about it. And someone helped me draft up a bill on the last day of the session, which has no chance of passing. A bill has to be around for at least 3 days, to be read 3 times to pass one chamber before it goes to the other. So any bill you're dropping in the last day is not to get it passed. It's just to get a little news and maybe have people talk about it. So I introduced what became a very famous bill called the Innkeeper's Notification Bill. And what this bill did, it said that all hotels, motels, and inns in the state of Georgia must post on the back of their guest room door. You know, when you rent a hotel, you see this little panel back there and it's got the escape route and it's got all these other little tiny print. Well, we decided that we should post these Georgia statutes that made certain things illegal. So we wanted to post the adultery law, the fornication law, and the sodomy law on the back of the door in the hotel rooms. Section 2 of the bill said it must be in 10-point print, it must be in Braille, and it must be in internationally recognized symbols for our foreign visitors.
How long did it take you to think that up?
Well, I had help with folks who were smarter and more daring than me, but just to finish this story got, I didn't realize it, but the Associated Press put that out on their international wire. And it was the last day of the session, and we finished at midnight, and some of us went out most of the night. I had every morning drive time radio show in America trying to call me. This is before cell phones. My phone machine filled up. People thought I was a religious right-winger or whatever, and that I was trying to make sure everybody knew about these laws. And they didn't get it that I was trying to be funny. I was just letting folks know. So I get a phone call the next day from a young guy on the radio who was later to become a little more famous, a guy named Sean Hannity. And he said, Representative Teper, I see you introduced this bill about sexually prohibited laws, and I want you on my show. So I said, well, I don't know who you are, but yeah, I'll go on your show. So the next day I was on his show for 3 hours, and I played it straight. And he said, Representative Teper, why did you introduce this bill? And I said, well, Sean, I said, we got the Olympics coming to Georgia. I said, we're going to have all these foreigners coming to Georgia and renting our hotel rooms. And I said, we want to make sure they know what is illegal sexual behavior. I said, you know how the French are. So this went on for about 3 hours. I was on the radio. I had friends who were listening who said they were laughing so hard they almost drove off the road. He didn't get it for the first period of time. He gave away tickets to the steeplechase for the best faxed-in design for international symbols for no sodomy. And at the very end of the show, he looks at me, and people in the studio, his technicians and everything who know me and know my sense of humor, they were laughing. And he's starting to understand that maybe I was pulling his leg. And he said, Representative Teper, were you really serious about this bill? And I said, well, Sean, originally I intended this to be tongue-in-cheek, but I found out that was against the law here in Georgia. Anyway, so that was the first time I did a bill like that. A couple years later, I had a friend who was the mayor of Decatur, Mike Mears, former Marine veteran, taught at one of the African-American colleges in Atlanta, just a tremendous fella. He also, in his law practice, defends people on death row. And I'd been out of the country. I'd been traveling actually in Mexico and in Miami, and I'd been gone for a week, and I drove from Miami 11 and a half hours, and I had done some athletic events down in Miami. I did a triathlon, and I was dead tired. I went to sleep, and I hadn't been in Atlanta or in Georgia for a week, and I hadn't been following the news. I get a phone call, it wakes me up. I'd been sleeping for hours, and it's Mayor Mears. And he says, Representative Teper, I need your help. And I said, I'll do anything for you, Mike. And he says, I'm representing an individual on death row, and we're trying to help this guy, and I need you to shave and put on a suit and come downtown. This is not during the session. And he says, I want you to sign a petition for a stay of execution. We've been fighting. Georgia is one of the last 3 states in the country that uses the electric chair, and we don't want him to be electrocuted. I said, Mike, I'll do this for you. You know, I don't know anything about the case. I don't know who the guy is. It doesn't really matter. But if you're telling me it's the right thing to do, on your word, I'll help you out. So I go down to the Capitol, and I go in, I sign a petition for a stay of execution that goes over to the Board of Pardons and Parole. And I come walking out of the Capitol, and in front of the Capitol, there's about 300 TV cameras. And it's like what happens on Death Penalty Watch. There's all these people from around the world show up, and I'm walking up to the podium, and Mike runs away. So I will go up to the podium, and I said, and Rhonda Cook from the Atlanta Constitution, she says, Representative Teper, you signed a petition to stay of execution for Larry Lonshore. He was convicted of shooting 3 people in the head at a poker game, card game. And he said, why did you sign this petition to stay of execution? And I'm coming up with this on my feet. And I said, Rhonda, and all the TV cameras are on, I said, there are 1,000 people on death row in Georgia. And she responds, she goes, there's not 1,000 people on death row. I said, Rhonda, those are the people awaiting organ transplant. I said, if you electrocute this individual, he would like to donate his organs. You electrocute him, you ruin all the organs. If we change the method of execution, we might be able to save you some kind of positive thing out of a terrible situation. I just came up with that. And so she says, and everybody's looking at me just astonished, and she goes, what method of execution do you recommend? And I said, the guillotine. And everybody just rocked back on their heels. And I said, what's the matter? Are y'all squeamish about a little blood? And she said, that's so barbaric. And I said, frying somebody alive is civilized? Anyway, that led to me introducing a bill to change the method of execution from the electric chair to originally the guillotine. I also was going to have it televised. But what ended up happening was, of course, there were a flurry of bills that were introduced that year, and we changed the method of execution to lethal injection. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting how these bills, using my kind of warped sense of humor to try to bring attention to an issue, sometimes you can get a little bit of change happening.
Right. What are some of the other bills you sponsored?
Well,
Snipe hunting.
in 16 years, I was looking over, I did a lot of different diversified stuff. Everything from transit bills. I tried to help transit systems in the state of Georgia, MARTA, as well as many other cities in Georgia have transit systems. They are always lacking for funding. People forget, a lot of folks in the city, not everybody has a car, so I actually ended up putting the executive director of the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority onto the MARTA board so that there'd be folks working together. I had a number of environmental bills promoting conservation in water use. Water wars were always a big issue. From my freshman year, I was one of 4 people to vote against the Georgia Regional Reservoir Act. Some people referred to it as the Thomas B. Murphy Regional Reservoir Act. The state was planning to build reservoirs around the state, and I at that time didn't think it was a good plan. I was not fond of damming up our rivers, pristine rivers and streams. I thought there might be better ways to do it. So I was one of 4 people to vote against that. I don't think I made Speaker Murphy very happy about that. But I had a number of other proposals. I chaired the DeKalb delegation for a number of years. So I took on quite a bit of DeKalb County's legislation. We always fought about the form of government in DeKalb County. The famous Manuel Maloof had gone from being chair. We had before me had created a new form of government called the CEO. It's the only form of government like it in the 159 counties in Georgia. I constantly had to tweak that legislation. I did redistricting for the DeKalb County Commission. Let me share one story which I'm not sure I should. This might not reflect well on me, but it affects a very famous individual, and I think the story needs to be told by me. In '92, as we all know, every 10 years the legislature gets to redistrict Congress, the State House, and State Senate. Well, we also get to do county commissions and school boards. Well, I was a young legislator, and I wasn't going to have a lot of input in some of the bigger races like Congress. I got to have a little say in my personal state legislative district, but the DeKalb delegation had turned over very quickly, and the 2 senior members became Representative Thurbert Baker and myself. Well, somehow or other, and now I think I understand why, I became the guy who was drawing the DeKalb County Commission map. Later that I find out that's a good way to make enemies for life. But at the time, I had time and energy, and I decided to do it. Well, we had friends on the DeKalb County Commission, and we had some enemies on the DeKalb County Commission. We had some folks who were good folks, but were not real effective. Well, the most famous member of the DeKalb County delegation at the time was a civil rights hero by the name of Hosea Williams. Hosea had served in the Georgia House, the City of Atlanta City Council, and now the DeKalb County Commission. When Hosea left the State House, his wife, Juanita, took his seat. Hosea had become a legend, a living legend. Several times he had gotten elected from jail. He was very well known for leading demonstrations. He was on the radio a lot with WSB, Neil Bortz, who loved him because he was such a character. And anytime there was a demonstration, Hosea would have a group of people out there. There were folks at the DeKalb Commission who were not happy with Hosea's participation at the commission. And I got along with him fine, but we were trying to have an effective commission. And through a lot of politics, I drew a map that had Hosea's district go from his area in East Lake, and it got about as wide as a street and went up to Tucker, Georgia, where a lot of those folks were not traditional Hosea supporters. And I had people from Tucker call me with death threats. They said, "You made Hosea Williams my county commissioner." And I said, "What's wrong with that?" And they said, "You know what's wrong with that." I said, "He's a DeKalb Countyan, he's a Georgian, and he's an American. And he's he's your county commissioner." But what ended up happening was, in order to get that map to pass, you had to get a certain number of signatures in the House from your delegation. And none of the Republicans would sign my bill because I wasn't treating them real well in this map. And one of my Democratic colleagues couldn't sign it. And I had to get all the rest of the Democrats to sign it. Well, Juanita Williams, little did I know, had been in some disputes with her husband. And she didn't always show up at the Capitol either. And on the last day of the session, I called Juanita, and she came down and she signed the bill that redistricted Hosea out of his seat. And it went over to the Senate, and it passed, and went through the Justice Department, and it passed, and basically Hosea chose not to run. But I'll always remember Hosea being on TV on something called the Pity Pat show, and he would talk about how the man put him out of office. And I would sit there watching it, and I'd say, "Hosea, the man is your wife." So anyway, that's one of the other bills that I passed in the legislature.
Well, I want you to tell us about snipe hunting.
Oh Lord. Once again, my sense of humor gets me in trouble. Hunting is a huge sport in Georgia, and a lot of us enjoy it. And I've been hunting myself down near Statesboro. And we had a colleague from down in Statesboro, Bob Lane, who had a bill that was going to make hunting a right. Now, traditionally in Georgia, you have to get a hunting license. And I don't know the legal difference between having to apply for a license and it being a right. In my mind, if it's a right, you shouldn't have to get a license. But Bob had this bill for some extended period of time, and the speaker was working with Bob, and they decided to hurry up this bill before lunch one day. And we had a full calendar in the morning, and it was coming up to lunch, and a lot of people wanted to go. And they brought up Bob goes to the podium, and he says, "This bill don't hardly do nothing. It makes hunting a right." And the speaker says, "All right, we got any questions?" And my hand goes up, and the speaker was in such a hurry that he didn't call on me. And the bill was voted, and it passed overwhelmingly, and I voted against it. And a reporter for the Morris News Service comes running over and says, "Representative Teper, why did you vote against this bill?" And I said, "Well, sir," I had some questions. I said, "If you make it a right, do you still have to get a license?" And he said, "Why do you even care? You're from DeKalb County. How many folks in your district are hunting?" And I said, "Well, I was concerned about how it might affect local regulations." And he says, "What kind of local regulations does DeKalb County have on hunting?" And I said, "Well, there's the one on snipe hunting." And it's an old Southern joke about what you do to a young kid. You send him out in the woods to go snipe hunting. There are no hunting regulations, but I thought the reporter would get it, and he didn't. And he ended up writing a story that ran in the Savannah, Athens, and Augusta newspapers about how I had voted against this bill because I was concerned about the snipe regulations in DeKalb County. So, yeah, I got myself in trouble once again.
Somewhere along the line there, you again looked at running for Congress. Yeah. And then you sued the state. Yes. with a very landmark decision about raising funds. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah. In 1996, my good friend and colleague, McCracken Poston from Ringgold, Georgia, was leaving the legislature, and he was running for U.S. Congress. I, after having gone through these ethics wars, was concerned about what my future might be like in the legislature, and I was eyeing the congressional seat near me. Now, what had happened before I was in the legislature, there had been a controversy about members having fundraisers during the legislative session. And some newspapers had embarrassed the legislature, and the state legislature passed a law that said members of the state legislature could not raise money during the legislative session. Well, I looked around and I saw incumbent members of the U.S. Congress raising money year-round. Well, if you were a state House or state Senate member, for 3, almost 4 months out of the year, you were prohibited from raising any money, which gives your opponent, the incumbent member of Congress, in my mind, an unfair advantage. Well, as I come to find out, the legislature wasn't going to change that law. Would have been embarrassing to try to change it where you could raise money during the session. And myself and 2 friends who had raised money for me in the past, we filed a suit called Teper v. Miller. And we had to name Governor Miller and actually Secretary of State Max Cleveland, because he's the head of the elections part of government, and members of the Ethics Committee. I named them in a federal lawsuit, and I had a very good attorney, and we went to federal district court saying that the state legislature could not set regulations for people running for federal office. And we went into federal district court during the session, and Judge Willis Hunt, as a coincidence, happened to go to University of Georgia with his son. He ruled in favor of my petition, my brief, and Attorney General Michael Bowers proceeded to appeal the case to the U.S. Court of Appeals. And my attorney took that case to the next level, and I was successful there. At an expedited hearing, I won on a 2-to-1 decision, and the court said that indeed the state legislature cannot set these conditions for a candidate for federal office. They can regulate. You still cannot raise money if you're running for re-election to the state House or state Senate. You cannot raise money. But if you're running for U.S. Congress, and of course, I ended up not running that year, and I think I have helped a number of my Republican colleagues who were in the House who ran for Congress. They indeed have raised money during the session and got it elected to Congress.
After 16 years, you called it quits. Tired or reapportioned?
I was tired. I had something I really kind of want to talk about. When I first ran for office, my father, who was a small businessman, he didn't understand. He said, "How are you running for office?" He said, "You're not a Rockefeller or a Kennedy." In his mind, people who run for political office are wealthy, and we were not wealthy. And I also did not have a career. A lot of my colleagues, ultimately in the legislature, came from either wealthy families or they had careers. They were lawyers or they had some kind of businesses which allowed them for at least 3 months of the year, if not the rest of the year, they had time and the advantages of being able to go to meetings and serving on boards. I mean, it's a big sacrifice that all my colleagues make when they decide to go into public service. Well, most of my 16 years, I lived like a college kid. And I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have a career. I picked up jobs here and there. I worked at a beer and wine store. I poured concrete. I did a little bit of consulting, business development consulting, but it was not a good livelihood. And I spent most of my 30s making very little money as a public servant. And I'm not blaming anybody else. That's my decision. But I had several girlfriends over that time period who were very smart, very beautiful, and they enjoyed meeting all the people we got to meet and all the parties we got to go to. But at the end of the day, financially, I didn't have a whole lot of money. And after 16 years, I decided I better do something to resolve that issue because I didn't want to, lose any more potential mates, or just to take care of myself in the future. So it was time to move on.
What then?
Well, that's a great question. I had assumed that after all these years in the legislature where I must say I took great advantage of my position. I got to travel around the world. Different foundations look at a young legislator and they'll pick you to, they think you're an up-and-coming guy. And the American Council of Young Political Leaders took me to China. Different groups nominated. I got to go to the Middle East, to Europe. I got to meet a lot of people, not just in Georgia, but around the country. I went to a lot of conferences in Washington, around the country. I thought I had made a lot of connections. I figured the minute I retired, someone would snap me up and pay me a lot of money. Well, I found out very quickly that a lot of businesses do not advertise for ex-legislators. They love you when you're in there, but once you're not in there, you're not a whole lot of help for them. I did have a couple of interesting things, and I'll let you know what I ended up doing. Right out of the box, I have to share with you that while I was in the legislature, I made a point of meeting a fair amount of celebrities, sports figures, movie figures. Atlanta had a decent movie industry, and when movies were shot, I'd go out to the wherever they were shooting it around Georgia, and I'd introduce myself to whatever famous actor was there. And turns out a Georgia boy from Adel, Georgia, him and a guy from Lithia Springs and another woman from Arkansas, they had made a small film in Georgia, and they won an award at a festival, and they got nominated for an Academy Award. Well, I knew these folks. Ray McKinnon from Adel, Georgia, and Walt Goggins from Lithia Springs, and Ray's now departed wife, Lisa Blount. And they had this plan. They were successful actors out in Hollywood, and they had a script that the studios in Hollywood would not make. And they decided that if they won an Academy Award, that the studios would knock down their doors. I thought they were crazy. But they made this film in Georgia out in Covington, and they introduced it, and they got nominated. And darn if they didn't win an Academy Award. So one of the nicer things that we get to do as legislators is something called the privilege resolution. And it's usually not controversial. And at the end of every session, you will see all my colleagues honoring people who led great lives from their districts or people who won big awards. And the clerk's office prints up a nice copy, and you go out throughout Georgia and you see people with these things in their homes or in their offices, and it means a lot to them. Well, Ray won an Academy Award, so I drafted up a privilege resolution and passed it through the House, and I had a real nice copy. Well, in the meantime, he got busy in Hollywood. He made a movie with Billy Bob Thornton and his wife, Lisa Blount, and a couple years went by, and I retired from the legislature, and I get a call from the Atlanta Film Festival. And they said, Representative Teper, I said, former Representative Teper, and they said, do you still have that fancy copy of that privilege resolution that you have for Ray? And I said, yeah, I do. And they said, well, he's coming back to town. We're having an Academy Awards night party at one of our board members, and we'd like you to present it to him. And I said, that's great. I've been waiting to give it to him. And there's a big party, and I go out to this big house up in north side Atlanta, and Ray and Lisa are there, and they corner me, and they said, Chairman Teper, they said, we want to thank you for honoring us. They said, but we want your help. I said, what do you want my help for? They said, well, we want to make a film, and we want you to executive produce it. And I said, well, I don't know what an executive producer does. And they said, well, you help us raise money. I said, why are you asking me? You're the ones who won an Academy Award and you're in all these movies. They said, you know a lot of folks. You know a lot of folks with money. And if you'll introduce us, you can help us raise money. And I said, listen, I've never done this before. I said, I love you guys. I'll help you. But I don't know how to actually get the money. I said, I'll introduce y'all to anybody you want to meet. And they said, it's a deal. So my first year at the legislature, I was a tentative executive producer of a movie, and I traveled around the country and met with lots of wealthy people. I went to the Sundance Film Festival, and I schmoozed with all these Hollywood movie stars. And make a really long story short, we raised the money. Actually, Phil Walden, Sr., from Macon, Georgia, of famous music fame, he had Capricorn Records. He started a company called Capricorn Films, and he funded the movie. I met him. We shot the movie around Atlanta, and before he passed away, he sat around with us and told stories. But we made a film. I was not the executive producer, though, because the one who actually pays for the movie gets executive producer credits. I got a nice thank you in the credits, but I decided real quick that Hollywood was not the way of making. I didn't make any money. I spent a lot of money. I got a little frustrated. I didn't know what to do. I started applying for jobs all over the country. And I talked to a young lady who had worked on a political campaign in 1994. She had run a campaign for United States Congress against Newt Gingrich. She was the campaign manager for Michael Coles, who ran against Newt when he became Speaker of the House. And I had met her, and for years I'd been going to meetings in Washington, and I would call her, and every time I called her, her roommate would answer, and I'd say, is Kate there? And her roommate would say, no, she's in Malaysia, or she's on the West Bank of Palestine, or she's in all these far-flung places that I hardly ever heard of. I thought she was CIA. I didn't know what she was. And coming back to the time period, I'm calling all my friends looking for work. I find Kate out in Iowa. She's working for Hillary Clinton. And I said, Kate, this is Doug Teper. Hadn't talked to you in a long time. She said, oh, you still in the Georgia legislature raising hell? I said, no. I said, I'm looking for work. And she said, oh, you ought to do what I do. I said, Kate, what do you do? And she said, I help countries that are newly emerging democracies. She said, you would be great at it. I said, I'm sure I would be great at it. How do I get hired? And she said, I'll make a phone call for you. And she called what's called an NGO, a non-governmental organization in Washington, who then interviewed me on the phone. And they were going to send me to Kosovo in the former Yugoslavia. They were about to declare independence from Serbia, and they wanted me to go help them set up a new parliament. And I got all excited because I know politics and I know government. I don't know a lot about a lot of other places, but they said I'd be a good one. About a week before I was leaving, I had put notice on my apartment and put my stuff in storage. They called me and they said, Mr. Teper, we're sorry, we're not going to be needing you. We found somebody who speaks Albanian, and you don't speak Albanian. And I was really upset, and I put up the phone, and then I got mad, and I called them back. I said, you can't do this to me. I said, my stuff is in storage. I don't have an apartment. And they said, I was on my cell phone, they said, can you go on our website and see where else we're advertising? And I went on their website, and I'm reading to the guy. I said, it says Iraq. And the guy says, great. He says, their office is across the hall from me. I'll bring your folder over there. And so go over there, and somebody calls me, and they interview me. And the woman over there, she says, you're a twofer. I said, is that good? And she goes, yeah. She says, you know government, and you know politics. She goes, how quickly can you get to Iraq? And I said, I don't know. I've never been there. And aren't we at war with them? And she they overnighted me on a Thursday, airplane tickets. On Tuesday, I flew from Atlanta to Washington Dulles Airport to Vienna, Austria, and into northern Iraq that quickly. And that was just a consulting job. That was 6 weeks where I trained Iraqi political parties how to run election campaigns. We were gearing up for elections. Mm-hmm. Well, once I was in Iraq and I started learning my way around, a lot of people said, Doug, you ought to apply for the State Department. We have what's called provincial reconstruction teams. After we came in 2003 and blew lots of stuff up, we had to rebuild the country enough so that we could get out. And each state or province has a team, half military, half civilian, and you would be good working there. And I said, well, I'm not sure the State Department, and this was President Bush and Condoleezza Rice. I said, I'm not sure they'd want to be hiring me, but I'll give it a shot. And I came home and I applied online, and about a month or so later, I got an email and it says, congratulations, Mr. Teper, you've been conditionally accepted to the U.S. Department of State. And I call the phone number and talking to an administrator, and she says, well, you have to get a physical, you have to get a fiscal clearance, and you have to get a security clearance. So I'm all excited, and I need the job. I've been living off my credit cards. And so I filled out unbelievable paperwork. I mean, just like in the movies, stacks of it. And the security clearance was really something else. Have I ever traveled overseas? Well, I had traveled extensively. Had I ever met with foreign leaders? Yes. What did you talk about? Who was with you? Can they testify to what you talked about? I'd been to Cuba. I'd been to East Berlin back when there was an East Berlin. I had been to People's Republic of China. I'd been to the Middle East several times. I had to list all this stuff out, and the former FBI agent who was my person checking on me, he called everybody, all my arrest warrants. He called me up. And he said, Doug, I can't believe you lied to me. And I said, what did I lie about? He said, you didn't tell me about this arrest on January 2nd, 2008. I said, arrest? What was I arrested for? He looks at it, he said, speeding. And I thought about it. I said, I got a speeding ticket. That's not an arrest. He said, City of Atlanta has you as being arrested. I spent about a month working with the courts. It was a citation for a speeding ticket. Yeah. But anyway, I got my security clearance, and in November, December 2008, I did 3 weeks of training at the Foreign Service Institute, Department of State. I was sworn in as a member of the State Department, and on December 19th, they put you on an airplane to to Jordan at that time, and then they strap you into a C-130 military cargo plane and fly you like a corkscrew into Baghdad so that anti-aircraft guns don't get you. And then the helicopter takes you from Baghdad International Airport close by the American Embassy, and then they get you in the embassy for a little more orientation. And they give you body armor, and they put you on a little military helicopter by myself with 2 pilots and 2 guys with big machine guns out the window with the doors open, and they flew me to a base north of Baghdad, below the Kurdish area, but above Baghdad. It was a disputed area called Kirkuk province. There's a fight going on between the Kurds in the north, the Sunni Arabs, something called Turkmen, and Assyrian Christians, which are called Chaldeans. And they were all fighting over this area, and that was where I was to call home for the next 2 years and 7 months. Mm.
Tell us about what you did there.
The provincial reconstruction teams are interesting. Everything you learn, I had to learn from point zero. I don't have a military background. I grew up in Georgia and knew a fair number of folks who had served, but I had to learn everything about the military. The team itself is made up of half military. The team leader is usually a Foreign Service officer with the Department of State, and the deputy team leader is a lieutenant colonel. and they do about a year long. They come in, and they have a squad of soldiers who help take care of what we call life support. A lot of security goes on, and a lot of OPSEC, Operation Security. Everything has codes, locked rooms, what's called secret computers, and we have concrete walls, T-walls, and bunkers. We got rocketed quite a bit. At one point, we were getting rocketed every day, about 4:14 a.m. in the morning, would roll you out of bed. This story I love to tell is acronyms are very big in federal government and in the military. And I wasn't used to that. My first meeting was a 2-hour meeting with the military. I had a lieutenant colonel, and he would say, well, we live on a FOB, F-O-B, a forward operating base. You live in a CHU, C-H-U, a containerized housing unit. You wear PPE, personal protective equipment. You ride in an MRAP, a mine-resistant ambush-proof vehicle. And it just goes on from there. And I had about 2 hours of this. I walked out of a meeting and turned to the soldier next to me. I said, what was that all about? He said, I don't know. And that's what my next 2.5 years was like. But I had a great job. The team has different segments. We have what's called governance, which I was in. And we had folks who would leave the military base that I lived on, go outside the gate, and by the way, every time the vehicles, 3 or 4 vehicles would go out, soldiers in full battle rattle, a platoon of soldiers, full gear, helmets, machine guns. The guy in the turret has a 50 caliber machine gun. It's a big bullet. And they would test fire. So if I wasn't deaf before from rock and roll music in the legislature, test firing a gun and you're sitting inside a little tank on wheels. But we would go down to the equivalent of the state capitol, the provincial council. My first week there, I got to meet the governor and the deputy governor. I was just like at the legislature again. I really was qualified to do this job. They had not 2 chambers, not a House and a Senate. They had a provincial council. And it was made up of all the ethnicities that I told you about, Kurds and Sunni Arabs and Turkmens and Assyrian Christians. And they had committees, and we had interpreters. I need to share that the language, it was the Tower of Babel. I mean, it was incredible. This particular community was made up of people that was just, it was a very interesting place. And we helped them run the government. There were lots of needs. Basic stuff like electricity. They did not have 24-hour electricity. Water and sewer was terrible. Roads, health clinics. I got to be involved in a lot of projects, basic human needs, where some of it we had blown up and we were fixing, and some stuff was just ignored. Saddam Hussein, among other things, did not like Kurds. He had sent helicopters with poison gas and had killed thousands of them. And anywhere that had a Kurdish community, he had neglected. So there were things that were way past due. So I got to spend time, 4 to 5 days a week. I would go with a different platoon. Sometimes I would go down to the state capitol. Other times I would go to what you and I would call county commissions and city councils. Sometimes it involved traveling for an hour and a half in these vehicles. We had IEDs, improvised explosive devices. I had kids throw grenades at my vehicle that blew up, and it was crazy stuff sometimes. But I would go to council meetings, and I got to know the chairman and usually the police chief, sometimes some of the bureaucrats. I would get to know all of them. I'd go meet with them. I'd see what their needs were, see if we could help them. I'd help them prioritize. Little things that we take for granted, Robert's Rules of Order, a written agenda. Some of the stuff the Democratic Reform Council, I think we had it in Iraq before we did in Georgia. But the one other thing that I think people said, well, how did that how did your training in Georgia help you in Iraq? I said, well, in Georgia I dealt with warlords and tyrants. so it was actually good training, and I really met some wonderful people, both the Iraqis and the soldiers who provided for my security, and my colleagues who were from State Department, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Department of Justice. We had assistant U.S. attorneys who would come and spend a year and help with the courthouses and the police training. So it was a very interesting, multi-dimensional group that I worked with.
Are there public officials elected?
Oh, you're asking such a great question. Elections, which is really the goal of democracy. For most places, well, let me be careful about how I say this. Their Congress, they've had a couple of elections, and I was there during one of their elections, which is one of the highlights of my life. It was very interesting. They have a parliament, and it's a complicated system, and they had a hard time forming a government. But they also, most of the provinces, there's 18 provinces in Iraq, and 17 of them have had elections. My district did not, because of the conflict between the ethnicities. We kept trying to schedule it, and we couldn't decide on a legitimate voting list, who was eligible to vote, who could run. It was a bit of a mess. The local officials, the county commissioners and city council, they actually had been selected by the U.S. military. We went to different tribal leaders, different political parties, and they recommended leaders in their community, and the military did some vetting to make sure that what kind of terrorist history they might have, and if they seemed to be relatively clean, then they were appointed to their positions. The ultimate goal was to have local elections, which did not happen while I was there.
We've been over there now for more than a decade. How much progress have we made?
Well, the number one goal was to get rid of Saddam Hussein, who was a bad guy. Now, we learn in politics, you learned it in Georgia politics, be careful what you wish for. You might have who you think's your enemy, and you get rid of him, and you might get somebody worse. The proof has not been told yet, I don't believe. There's been some bad signs. Every once in a while, there's some good signs. Ultimately, I think one of our goals, there were when we went to war, I did not support going in for the reasons that were originally given. I was not trustful of the people who were telling us why we were going in. Once we were in, we were in. And everybody says the old joke about the China shop, you break it, you own it. And we, for better or worse, we owned it. We got Iran on the border, and we need an ally in Iraq. And so we were trying to help them. We were also trying to help them select their own leadership, which is not always easy in a culture which has clans, tribes. A lot of people get their leadership by violence, and we were trying to have them select their own leadership. So the short answer is there's, on a legal pad with a line drawn the better, there's some things that are better and there's some things that are worse. It's a very tenuous place.
Let me read and ask your comments on a privileged resolution passed by the Georgia General Assembly. And I quote, this is referring to the Four Horsemen. They trampled over custom, tradition, and convention, thereby redefining the role of the modern state legislator. Is that how you would like to be remembered?
May not be exactly the words I would use, but I think that captures the sense of time and place. I think it's a good thing if you can be a person at a time in history where there's some transition going on. we talked earlier about I was told to sit in my seat and be quiet for 14 years. Those times were over. My district certainly wasn't going to put up with that. As it turned out, I had some colleagues in other parts of the state who also felt the same way. Part of it was personal ambition, but also part of it was just that time in history. Speaker Murphy had been speaker for a great deal of time. We had some great leaders. We had Zell Miller and Tom Murphy and Joe Frank Harris and others who had been running the state for a long time, and their time was going to come to an end eventually, and we had to reform the system. And a small group of younger guys decided that it was our place and our time to start pushing those boundaries. Mm-hmm. And we chose to do so. Some of it worked for some of us and some of it didn't work for some of us. But I think it was the right thing to do at the time.
I remember you were often referred to as the Roger Dangerfield of the Georgia legislature. Is that because of your quick repartee, or is that because you didn't get any respect?
Combination of both. I think we can all appreciate this. The legislature, when I got down there, first of all, it wasn't partisan when I got down there. Republicans and Democrats, there wasn't really much of a difference in my eyes. A lot of the issues had to do with rural versus urban. And it didn't matter whether you were Democrat or Republican. There were just issues that people knew what their issues back home were. And if you were from the country and you didn't have a bus, you didn't see much sense to funding bus systems. And I wasn't mad with anybody. I certainly understood that. I was a big environmentalist. I love telling the story. I got put on natural resources. And the chairman and the majority of the committee at that time, their job was to harvest natural resources. I got elected to conserve natural resources. Diametrically opposite mindsets. My colleagues were not bad guys. They were wonderful people. Some of them were from small rural Georgia towns where the graduation rate wasn't very good from the public schools. If a kid got out of the small town, they went off to the University of Bulldog. And if the kid got a degree, he didn't go back home to small rural Georgia. He'd go to Atlanta to get a job, and some of these towns were hurting. And if you were an elected official from back then, you were desperate to bring in business and industry, a highway. So I did some smart things early on. I knew that it was a seniority system. I would pick at least 2 to 3 guys a day I didn't know, and I'd sit down next to them and I'd ask them about themselves. You know, had they served in the war, what their families did, what they grew on the farm, where they went to school, if they went to school, if they had kids, did they go to Georgia? I knew so many people at Georgia. I had partied up here a lot. And you could always find something in common, even with your ideological opponent. You had somebody in common who was, you know, might be a best friend or a cousin even. And I found that everybody in the House and Senate you could find something in common with. And what you do, like in life, is you find something to agree on and make that a starting place. You'll have plenty of disagreements, but if you have something in common, I found that it served me well over the years. That now that being said, I was passionate and I was young, and I stepped on toes, and the legislature was rural dominated, and I'd also been told by some of the older gentlemen, or the good old boys if you want to call it, to stay out of the newspaper. Well, I'd been drinking at Manuel's Tavern since I'm 12 years old, and I knew a whole lot of reporters from the Constitution and the Journal back in the day, and they loved the fact that I was down there, and they wanted to write stories all the time. And I had to do this dance. Half the time I needed to be in the paper so that my district knew I was working on their behalf. On the other hand, the more I was in the paper, the more the guys down at the legislature would get mad that I was down there showing them up. So I think part of my reputation was I did some little things to get in the paper, but I did some things to avoid being in the paper as well.
16 years. What were your greatest accomplishments?
I think being a part of the reform movement was valuable to all the people of Georgia and the institution itself. My study of politics and history is institutions need to adapt over time, or they become irrelevant, or they fail miserably. So while at the time there might have been some conflict, I think myself and my colleagues who joined in our endeavor had the best interest of Georgia and the legislature in mind. Even though those who had been there were resistant to change, I think we all have to ultimately change. So I think I'm proudest of having played a small part in being the group that pushed those changes.
Your biggest disappointments?
There are several. As a personal ambition, you know, as you work your way up from volunteering on campaigns and then, you know, working on campaigns and then running yourself and getting elected, you'd like to go on and do bigger and better things, statewide office or Congress, and you know, the cards don't always turn out that way. Demographically, my neighborhood changed dramatically. My county changed. What became fashionable in Georgia, the partisanship, the changes. I would have liked to have done more as an elected official. I kind of ultimately saw that I might be done as an elected official as a state house member. And that was a little disappointing on a personal note. Also, I am a politician. I do have an ego. You'd like to be recognized for your contributions. I had this terrible fight with a very good friend at the Atlanta newspaper. I joked with them that the only time they ever mentioned my name is if they thought I was violating ethics or I'd been arrested. I said, my friends from rural Georgia, when they bring a new school or a highway, their picture is on the front page cutting a ribbon. And I said, y'all never show when I'm doing something good. And my friend at the newspaper said, well, that's not news. It's only news when you do something bad. And that was I was crushed by that. And I decided that, you know, this wasn't going to be my place anymore. I do want to mention one final bill. One of the final bills as a senior member, I'd been very close to Governor Barnes. Him and his folks were very good to me. I was a chairman by that time. I was on rules. I had access to the governor's office. I would bring in ideas, and from time to time they would incorporate my ideas into their bill. So we got a lot done. One of the things I got to do was, after Governor Barnes at the end, was my county needed a new public safety building, and they didn't have the funding, and they needed new funding. And I sponsored a bill to create a new funding authority with $50 million of authority. Well, that's a decent-sized number, and I had learned a lot of tricks in my 16 years. The new governor wasn't necessarily going to help me. I was willing to do it even if my name wasn't on it. I called the bill the War on Terrorism Local Assistance Act. I had the police chief and the fire chief in full regalia standing behind me at all the committee meetings. My bill passed the House overwhelmingly, and ultimately I got over to the Senate, and I was able to attach this bill onto a local legislation from one of the governor's floor leaders, and it passed. And the governor wasn't excited about signing it, but his floor leaders needed his bill, and it became law. Mm-hmm. And which led me, and the floor leader was a Republican, and I looked back at a lot of my legislation. I think a majority of my bills that I passed in the House, and there were many, I had a Republican handle on the Senate side. So I just want folks in future generations to know it wasn't always Democrat versus Republican. We had friends and colleagues from urban and rural who had same interests and agreed on certain things, and they would help you when the time was right. And so I was pretty proud of some of the achievements that I was able to do by working with good people.
Well, Doug, as I said, you are a very interesting fellow. Good luck.
Well, thank you. Let me mention one other thing, something I saw that comes up from time to time, and that's influences on my political career. And I just want to mention a couple of people. Number one, and I think most folks will say this, my parents, I am what I come from. The acorn does not fall far from the tree. My personality, my sense of humor, I blame on my mother and father. They were very sociable people, and that had helped me throughout my whole political career. Politically, my parents were not political, and I was never really sure where I picked up the politics, but I grew up in Atlanta at an interesting time, and I had certain role models. And I did want to mention the fact that I had the good fortune of working with now Congressman John Lewis. I worked on a city council race. I served on a board with him, got to be friends with him. And this guy was an icon, is an icon, and a hero in the civil rights movement. And I think he was an inspiration. As a kid, I used to go with my daddy downtown when he had to get permits for construction to City Hall, and I got to know Mayor Ivan Allen Jr. And in fact, my brother, whose name is Ivan, his picture and Ivan Allen's picture were in the newspaper one time, and I just knew what a patron of the city he was. So even though my parents weren't purely political, by virtue of growing up in a small southern city at that time, I was subject to meeting people like John Lewis and Wyche Fowler, and also Justice Weltner is the third person I want to mention. He stood as a person of great principle and someone to look up to. And when you had those kind of figures when you were growing up, I think by osmosis, it influenced me to get involved in politics and end up doing what I'm doing now.
Thank you, Doug Teper.
Thank you, Bob. I'm honored to be here.